Well, I understand you are something of a thespian.
I usually just refer to myself as an actor, but, thespian, if you will.
Actor. Fair enough. Well, I suppose you're wondering just what the hell this is all about. Well, I will attempt to elucidate. You see, I have a university grant to study creativity, specifically to quantify creativity. Just what is it that separates an ordinary painter from Picasso, an ordinary scribe from Fitzgerald, an ordinary actor from Brando or Barrymore.
This film's about John Crowther.
A mentor of sorts. Raised me in the film business. It's kind of mafia parlance for a guy who's made, kind of bringing in a new guy into the fold. That's kind of what John did for me. And I say that because we met through my short documentary back home years ago, The Real Casino, which was about the real wise guys that Casino was based on, the Scorsese film. And I did it for IFC Bravo. I think it gave John the confidence to kind of work with me on my third feature film. He was one of the leads.
A film called Into the Chasm. As an actor, he was definitely a working screenwriter, had a very successful career in Hollywood by any metric, wrote a couple Charles Bronson pictures for, he wrote Missing in Action, Chuck Norris, a tremendous actor. He had done theater in New York, he was the son of legendary New York Times film critic Bosley Crowther. Huge impact on me because there was this book, The New York Times Goes to the Movies, and many of the reviews, it's basically the history of cinema through the New York Times. And Bosley Crowther writes the introduction and has many reviews, and for me as a kid, was cinema for me, it really was, because this is before you could just go and get, you'd have to wait for re-releases and so on and so forth. You couldn't just go pick up video. Video really wasn't out yet. Cable wasn't everywhere. Cable came very late to New York. He talked about very fondly, discussing films, having arguments about various films, Nashville being one of them. He was chiding his dad that he was missing the Altman wagon or whatever. Ended up going to Italy. He directed his only feature film, The Martlet's Tale. He also worked with Anna Magnani, and rubbed elbows with like Paolo Pasolini. He knows Anna Magnani. He owns a home in Tuscany and ends up coming back to the United States and, writing these films, which was definitely not him. Chuck Bronson, he was an artist, man. The screenwriting was always kind of, as I say, a little bit of a mystery. What he really thought of the work, kind of vacillate between, on the one hand, maybe he was a little, embarrassed about it, or just wasn't proud of it. It wasn't who he really was as an artist, as a creative person, the evil that men do, kill and kill again, missing in action, damned river, these are all cool titles, but that's the thing. Some of these were big budget films for the time, action pictures, I think one was like, Bronson was still a major star, and you're talking a $14 million budget. J. Lee Thompson was kind of almost like not quite at the level of Robert Aldrich, but in that neighborhood, a guy who'd done studio action pictures, Guns of Navarone and that kind of thing. And I think he did talk about that picture in particular, The Evil That Men Do. But there was a certain pride that he was a working screenwriter and, being vested in the guild and the pension and all that. But on the other hand, it's like, if I had my name on, like, a major blockbuster for the period which when Missing in Action was, like, I'd be screaming from the hilltops. It's When you think about it, you get a credit on a major motion picture, you are going to be a working screenwriter. You're going to get a lot of work, period. Because you're in demand, So, he did say clearly he made quite a bit of money if it weren't for race car driving, But again, he just never talked about it. And I would always discover, little tidbits with John here and there. For instance, he was really very tight with Bruce Paltrow, Gwyneth Paltrow's father. From their days, I think, in New York theater. As a matter of fact, his obituary from Princeton, he was class of 61, mentioned that he actually introduced Blythe Danner to Bruce Paltrow. I guess he dated her first. Because the IMDb pages were, he didn't give a fuck about any of that stuff. He literally had almost as many different credits. Like, there were like 18 John Crowthers, with the Roman numerals. One for acting, and then, one for this picture, and that one, and then, it was like, it's almost like you had a different John Crowther for almost every film, and finally someone put it all together. When you see your name up there on a major motion picture, I would have made a much bigger deal about it. And the only thing I can figure is what he always said, his mantra always was, just, don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Just do you. Do your thing. Don't worry about the industry. Do your own thing. Do you. Don't worry about the studios. Do you as an artist, pursue your own work. Don't worry about what the industry is doing and all that, sort of crap. He was just so bored with just chasing industry. Like, oh, I've got this heist picture. And he was a stickler for that. He didn't care. Like, if, I would talk about, I got this bigger budget thing. I don't want to hear it. Like, I don't care. Like, he just had no interest in that whatsoever. And I think that was maybe a little bit of the disappointment that, having that time in Italy and Rome, Cinecittà, rubbing elbows with, Bertolucci or Pasolini and these guys in the 70s, Federico Fellini. He was there at that time. Carla Romanelli, his wife, was, huge, really. An international star. And, it's really interesting what he did in my film. It was just almost like, wildly improvisational, even though it was still married to the text. It was the script. He was not going off, but he was interpreting it in just tremendous ways. Really interesting.
Yes, it is a bit cloak and daggerish, but believe me, in the academic world, that is absolutely necessary. You may have heard the case of several misguided animal rights zealots a few months ago who broke into that cancer laboratory and released those animals into the wild. Well, you can imagine the value that secrecy would have had in that scenario. It's ironic that those poor creatures that they were so concerned about died perfectly horrible, inhumane deaths.
It's a shame. It did strike me as incredibly stupid.
It was stupid and dreadful. It was an awful thing. Well, all right, Mike, come on. Something else is bothering you.
By the time I know John, kind of the Hollywood party is over, the screenwriting party. He's, semi-retired. He's helping out his friend Merritt Blake, the Blake Agency.
He had Robert Duvall at one point. It's kind of a boutique agency. Then he ended up losing Duvall, but then still had tremendous character actors.
Wilford Brimley, Scott Wilson,
Frederick Forrest. John called him Freddie Forrest.
Frederick Forrest, who turned down American Beauty. He didn't like the Chris Cooper character, the former army sergeant or whatever. He called him a Nazi or whatever. He said, I'm not going to play that guy. But I don't know if he would have wanted to have that one back. Great actor. Catherine Ross, Angie Dickinson, and John gave me his, his roster. to try and put a project together. September 2000. It was my first screening in Los Angeles. The Real Casino was at the Santa Monica Film Festival. Came down and stayed with John. You know, we hung around Santa Monica. We went to the film festival, saw my film. He kind of acted as my de facto agent of sorts.
It's just very matter of fact. There was no big to do about it, as typical for him. You know, I mean, I just found out recently from his wife that, you know, he was at the Cannes Film Festival 1970. His dad, Bosley, was the grand jury, head of the grand jury. And, I mean, you know, a year later, 1971, Keith Richards was there. I mean, you know, Crowther was dressed like a rock star with the car. I mean, it just, you know, again, when I met John, he was a much older man, you know, 60-something.
As an assistant, he's going through some of the contract stuff, you know, for some of the actors that they have, like Scott Wilson or Wilford Brimley or whatever. And, you know, as he alluded to, you know, it's SAG plus 10 or what have you. And then, you know, they get to go off and have fun, you know, and while he, you know, just gets to kind of, you know, sit by, you know, and that's, I distinctly remember him saying that, you know, they get to go off and have the fun. And so, you know, clearly I think he, you know, he wanted to get work, you know, as a character actor and so forth. And he had more than enough of, you know, the chops to do so. It's just, he just didn't want to go through the bullshit, you know, just like he would say about Scott Wilson. You know, some kid would want him to, you know, read for a few lines, you know, in some indie film. It's like, you know, listen, man, just look at my reel, you know. What he did in my film, which I feel bad that I couldn't get him more traction, you know, just to get other younger filmmakers to see what he was capable of, you know, and of course the one-man shows and so forth, you know, were amazing. And so
it's understandable. I'm terribly sorry that I didn't clarify all that sooner. Well, okay, as you will see, I am a board certified in psychiatric medicine for the state of New York.
Right. I'm sorry. I hope you didn't take offense. It's just
I'm sorry I didn't clear it up sooner with you. We wouldn't want you to be hooked up with some quack.
I think by this point, you know, he's a little disheartened, but kept reinforcing, just do your thing. Do your thing. Don't worry about Hollywood. Don't worry about all this stuff. It really is a mystery to me, you know, why stay in Los Angeles when you have the villa in Italia in Tuscany, you know, and, you know, and to be clear, I mean, he really was, I mean, I've been in contact with Carla a little bit doing this film, and, you know, she said specifically, yes, you know, Fellini and Giulietta, you know, were at our house frequently, you know, Federico and Giulietta, you know, Fellini and Giulietta Messina, his wife, you know, were over at their place frequently. I mean, you know, I mean, that's not to say that he was going to go back to Rome and, you know, go, you know, make films, but I mean, come on, you know, Carla was still working, you know, again, just, you know, international star, you know, was doing films for quite some time. I mean, I'm sure he could have gotten something, you know. And yeah, you know, it's that thing, it's that Hollywood thing, you know, it's that bug. You know, it's around this time, too, that, you know, as I've said specifically as well, you know, I lost track of John, simply lost track of him. One of the main reasons that I'm making this film is because as I was kind of digging out into the chasm to re-release on Vimeo On Demand, I was doing a little, you know, introductory piece, you know, that I was going to put on YouTube and whatever with a link to the film. That's when I discovered that he died. He died of cancer
was listed on IMDb, that he died of cancer on April 27th, 2018. Now, today is March 21st, 2023. He was dead for almost a full 5 years, okay, before I even realized, that he had passed away. So obviously, someone who was a mentor, a friend. It's not like there was any kind of row or falling out, or we had any kind of, it was nothing like that. It was just literally just drifted away,
there's no excuse. It's bullshit. I shouldn't have let that happen. I moved out to Simi Valley from the west side, around spring '07. And, by this time I've recut Into the Chasm to a short shadow play, like in '05, '06, '07, and that didn't really go anywhere. And then I get my own writing job, which was cool, and he was really, encouraging and all those things. And, there's some things going on for me, but, the truth of the matter is I just lost track of him. And it kind of coincided with him really kind of more or less dropping out completely. I think by now he's getting, full Social Security and all his full benefits, and he's doing, like watercolor and sketches and all that kind of thing. And it's just not really an interest in the business anymore, And Paul Castellano got whacked because from Gotti and those guys because he disrespected the guy that raised Gotti, Angelo Ruggiero. I think he missed his funeral or something. And that was like the last straw, And not trying to complain, I'm just being a little facetious, but look, man, that's what you do. You respect the guy who brought you along. And, I guess this is my way to kind of make penance, I fucked up, and so, that's just what it is,
Feel free to contact me if you ever need. What are your qualifications?